Hello, it's 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. South Carolina, Clemson, South Carolina. My name is Dil Kavaraja. I'm a professor here at the Clemson University. I am overseeing the Pulse Quality and Nutritional Breeding Program. Welcome all around the world for our Going Organic seminar series. Today is our last seminar for the spring, and hopefully we will see you again next year in the spring. Today, we have a really wonderful speaker and very well-known speaker, Dr. Erin Rees Clayton. Before we introduce our speaker, I wanted to thank our funders. Our program is funded by the United States National Institute of Food and Agriculture, NIFA, and the USAID Feed the Future, South Carolina Department of Agriculture, one and only the Good Food Institute, and USDA ARS uh, Department of Ag. So because of all your help, we should be able to do all of these four things, breeding pulse crops and having these kind of webinars. With that, I like to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Erin Clayton. Dr. Clayton is the Senior Scientific Research Advisor at the Good Food Institute. The Good Food Institute is an international nonprofit building a sustainable, healthy, and just global food system. Since 2016, Dr. Clayton worked with GFI. She has been the research director when she started. That's how I get to know Dr. Clayton. And she is now the Senior Scientific Research Advisor. Dr. Clayton holds a BSc degree in chemistry from DePauw University and a PhD in genetics. I was just talking to her about these genetics from the Duke University. And she holds a public health, a Master of Public Health degree in epidemiology from University of Michigan. I known her as a nutritionist, epidemiologist, policymaker, and I have been working with her for almost 6 years with our first establishment of the organic platform. With that, I would like to introduce Dr. Clayton.
Thanks very much, Dill. I am going to get my screen shared here.
Very good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for inviting me to speak today, and thank you to all of those who are here to listen. I appreciate your time this morning and look forward to your comments and questions as we move through the presentation today. So just in case you're not familiar with the Good Food Institute or GFI, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. So that means that we are supported by philanthropy. We are not a trade association, so we don't represent companies or anyone in particular. And we feel that this allows us to have a unique position that really enables us to live out our values of acting on evidence, inviting everyone to the table, and sharing knowledge freely. We have three key programmatic areas at GFI. Those include science and technology. That is the team that I am part of. We are really focused on advancing foundational open access research in alternative proteins and creating the research and training ecosystem that is needed to develop this field. We also have a corporate engagement team that partners with companies and investors to drive investment and scale the innovation and science that's being done. And we have a policy team that works to advocate for fair policy and additional public research funding for alternative proteins. I am part of our GFI US team, but we have affiliates around the world and are now a team of over 200 scientists, policy people, industry specialists working to create a world where alternative proteins are no longer alternative. For the purposes of today's talk, I'm going to focus in on just one part of our work that I hope is interesting and relevant to this audience. And it focuses around this hypothesis. if we are going to create a sustainable, secure, just, and healthy global food system, then alternative proteins have an essential role to play that is complementary to organic and agroecological food production methods. I would again love to hear your comments and questions on this hypothesis as we work through this presentation. So, to start with, what are alternative proteins? At GFI, when we talk about alternative proteins, we're really talking about proteins and foods that are produced from plants, animal cells, or microbes. And alternative proteins is a bit of a misnomer because the word protein means we automatically focus in on the protein, and that macromolecule is definitely important, but there's really so much more than that that goes into creating a food product. So we're really talking about these foods that, yes, involve proteins, but also lipids and fats, starches, micronutrients, and other ingredients that need to go into creating these foods. So just want to point out that it's not just about proteins, even though they tend to get most of the focus. So as the name suggests, plant-based foods are made from ingredients that come from plants. When we talk about cultivated meat, we're talking about meat that is produced directly from animal cells. So the end product is meat. It's just produced without the need to raise an entire animal. And fermentation is using microbial cells such as yeast or bacteria or sometimes algae to produce the proteins and ingredients that go into making the food products. So, why would we be interested in creating these alternative protein products? There are several reasons. One of the key ones is that the production of these foods is land efficient and they produce fewer greenhouse gas emissions than comparable foods that are made from animals. So this chart summarizes a lot of the data that we currently have from life cycle analyses that have been done on various alternative protein products. And so in this first column here is the product. You can see some of the different companies and brands that are making these products. And when they compare the production of each of these products to the conventional meat version, we can see reductions in environmental impact by quite a significant amount in most cases, both for greenhouse gas emissions and land use. So our theory of change at GFI is that behavior change is really hard. And it's not something that we shouldn't still strive for. But the urgency with which we need to act and the scale with which we need to act, it doesn't feel like behavior change is going to get us there all on its own. Meat demand is rising, even though we know that it contributes to significant environmental concerns. There's a fair amount of evidence that suggests that overconsumption of processed meat is not good for our health. But it tastes good. We like it, and it's part of our culture to eat it. And so instead of asking people to shift to a whole food plant-based diet, which yes is best for all of us, but might be hard to do, GFI's theory of change is really let's try and meet consumers where they are and create products that taste good, are familiar to them, that they want to eat, but that are produced in a better way. And so these environmental impacts are one of the ways that we see alternative protein production being better. But it's not the only way. We think that it also, and there's evidence to suggest that it also can promote biodiversity. There are global food security advantages by having more diverse, resilient, shorter supply chains. And there are global health benefits by reducing some of the risk to pandemic and zoonotic disease risk. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into more detail on any of these, but would be happy to do so in the Q&A, or I will share the slide deck with Dill afterwards so that she can share it with all of you. Most of the slides have a link down at the bottom that will take you to a website, either GFI's or someone else's, where you can find additional information about the information presented in the slide. So importantly, while there's significant potential benefit to alternative proteins, it's not yet inevitable that they will achieve these benefits. So here I'm referencing a report that was put out by the Climate Works Foundation and the UK government a couple of years ago, a global innovation needs assessment on protein diversity. And they found through their analysis that if we are going to unlock the full benefits of alternative proteins, global public spending on RD&D, which stands for research, development, and demonstration deployment, so thinking about the commercialization, the scale up, needs to increase to at least 4.4 billion for the R&D side and 5.7 billion per year, respectively. We haven't even seen these numbers, total investment in alternative proteins in the whole history of the world. And they're suggesting that this is the annual amounts that need to be invested in this space. So I think one thing I'd like to emphasize is that we are in the early days of the development of the alternative protein industry. There's a need for a lot more research and development, a need for regulation, fair policies, a need for workforce training and development, additional capacity building, infrastructure. There's a lot of work to be done, but I find that exciting. And I think for those of you that are in a research setting or in the food system, it's a pretty exciting time to be working in the field because of these possibilities. So for most of the rest of the talk, I'm going to focus in specifically on plant-based foods. So these are things that look, taste, and cook like conventional meat, offer this complex carbs and fiber, which is different from conventional meat, but like animal products are composed of protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, and water. Those ingredients just come from plants instead of animals. So I'd like to share some of the latest data we have on the US plant-based food market. I wouldn't be surprised if you have seen headlines talking about how this is a dead area. And again, as I mentioned just a couple slides ago, I think we're in the early stages. And to me, this is an industry that is poised for growth. And I think that the data points to that if we do the right things. So here are just a few statistics that I pulled from our website based on the retail market data that we have. I want to point out that this is for the US retail market. And right now, we are seeing plant-based foods as an $8.1 billion market. So that's sizable. We are seeing that 6 in 10 US households purchase plant-based foods. This was the statistic for 2023, and this is similar to the prior year. And even though 8.1 billion sounds like a large number, plant-based foods made up only a little over 1% of the total retail food and beverage dollar sales in 2023. So again, this is still a small market that has a lot of room to innovate and grow. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that 95% of US households that bought plant-based meat and seafood in 2023 also bought animal-based meat. So alternative proteins are not a product specifically for vegans or vegetarians. These products are really targeted to flexitarians, people who are looking to reduce their meat, or omnivores, as a way to provide additional choice and opportunity in the foods that are available. So looking at some of the key category sales metrics and purchase dynamics, here is our total plant-based foods dollar sales in 2023, 8.1 billion. We can see that plant-based meat and seafood make up 1.2 billion of that, and plant-based milk is almost 3 billion of that. Plant-based milk is the largest plant-based category in the US. And again, while these seem like good numbers, we can also see that growth is down in 2023. Sometimes the past 2 years it's down, or it's not growing very much. If we look at unit sales, again, we see a fair amount of products being sold, but this growth has also decreased over the past year. We think a lot of this is due to the economic situation, the fact that inflation has caused prices to rise. These products are expensive, but also they're not yet meeting what consumers want in these food products. When we look at household penetration, so this is how many households are buying these products, we see that almost 2/3 of US households are buying some type of plant-based food. Only a small number of them, though, are buying plant-based meat and seafood products. And again, I would suggest that this is likely due to those products not meeting the consumer, what the consumers want these products to be. And I'll show some evidence on the next slides to support that. And 44% are buying plant-based milk. And again, many households are buying both animal milk and plant-based milk, and sometimes different types of plant-based milk. Almond milk, soy milk, oat milk. There are lots of options out there, and it seems like consumers are liking to have these choices. And then when we look at the repeat rate, this is, do consumers just buy the product once, or do they buy it more than once? We see that in general, about 80% of consumers are buying products more than once. But again, this drops for plant-based meat and seafood, and again is right around that 80% mark for plant-based milk. When we ask consumers, why haven't you tried plant-based meat products again? So these are people who bought them once, but not again. This is what they say. I didn't like the taste. I prefer animal meat. I didn't like the texture. Maybe there's not an understanding of a reason to eat it. It was too expensive. And then several things here: too processed, not a good source of protein, too many ingredients, not healthy, that kind of get into health. So we see the key things being the sensory aspects, the taste and texture, the cost, and the health. And again, I think that this means that these products are not what consumers want yet. So from the R&D side, there's a lot of opportunity to address these aspects. And just to show where we are with the price. So again, this is looking at the average price of plant-based foods versus their animal-based counterpart in 2023 in the US retail market. The green circles are the average price for the plant-based product, and the yellow circles are the animal-based. So this is showing for total meat products, there's about a 77% price premium per pound when you're looking at plant-based versus animal meat. If we break this down by beef, chicken, pork, and turkey, we can see that there is some variability, with beef being the closest in price, but still a 20% price premium, which is not insignificant. Again, in the face of inflation and other economic pressures, people don't want to spend extra money on food. And some of these products are, more than 100%, sometimes more than 200% more expensive than their animal counterparts. So I think if our theory of change is really that if you give people products that taste good, that they can afford, that are familiar to them, we're clearly not yet at a point where we're able to do that. And so I think that there's a lot of exciting things that can be done to look at how we can bring the price of plant-based products down. So overall, I don't think it's worth looking at this saying that plant-based meat is dead or that it's over. I think, again, we're really in the early stages, and there are exciting signals and opportunities. There are significant demographic opportunities. Younger consumers, who in the next decade will be the majority of the people out purchasing food, are open to trying plant-based foods and indicate a willingness to have the choice to buy these products. And many consumers say that they would like to increase their plant-based food consumption over the next several years. So again, if we can give them products that taste good, that are healthy, that are at a price point that is reasonable, there's a likelihood they'll get purchased. And there's an enormous potential market for plant-based foods. In US retail alone, the annual conventional meat sales are over $100 billion. Conventional milk sales are $17 billion. So again, even just a small proportion of that market is a significant economic opportunity. As we saw a couple slides ago, taste and texture are key drivers of why people don't consume plant-based foods more than once. But there's been a lot of research in the past couple years that have worked to improve that. And there's still more work to be done, but we're seeing enough progress that it makes me think that it is possible to continue improving there. And then, as I showed on the previous slide, the price gap remains a barrier, but I think that is something that we can address. So none of these current challenges seem like roadblocks that can't be moved. So moving then into thinking about my hypothesis on one of the first slides and the fact that I see alternative proteins and organic agriculture as very complementary, I wanted to use the next few slides to just show some examples of how I see this potentially happening. And again, I would love to hear from you with your thoughts about what I'm going to share here. So, as a case study for looking at this connection between alternative proteins and organic farming, I wanted to share this report that came out just last week. It was perfect timing by the Green Alliance, which is a nonprofit in the UK. For full transparency, this was commissioned by GFI's Europe team. And the purpose of this analysis was really to start to understand how an increase in alternative protein consumption could shift land use across the 10 biggest agricultural countries in Europe. So in this report, they modeled two different scenarios. One was a low intervention scenario where they modeled modest growth of plant-based foods over the next couple decades until 2050, so that there was, a small percentage of the meat market being based on plant-based foods by the year 2050. And then they also did a high intervention scenario that they modeled where the economics and scale of newer technologies like cultivated meat and precision fermentation could also be contributing to alternative proteins in Europe. And what they found was that in both of those scenarios, land would be available for other ways of farming and other activities. And they proposed that there would be three outcomes from what they called a shared dividend scenario, where this newly available land is split between three priorities. They would be able to expand agroecology. That is the term that they're using. And this includes organic farming. So, really thinking about farming in a way that is regenerative, that is giving back to the soil and the land. Again, doing all of the things that organic farming is wanting to do. But they're using the term agroecology in this report. Another priority is onshoring food production. Many of these European countries in this report produce a lot of their food overseas and have to import it. And then expanding restoration of natural habitats to sequester carbon. Again, I want to just emphasize that we're not saying there needs to be less farming in this case. It's just, can it be done differently? And so the point that I wanted to really emphasize here for this audience is that one of the findings from this report is that alternative proteins could increase land available for organic farming. So what we're looking at here, these are the 10 European countries that they studied um, in this report. And we're looking at the percent of currently farmed land that would be managed organically by 2050. So in the green bars here, this is how much of the currently farmed land is managed organically in each of these countries today. So Denmark is sitting here maybe about 12%. And you can see for the most part, Netherlands is a little bit lower, Sweden is a little bit higher. But the green bars show that today, across all of these 10 countries in Europe, the amount of farmed land being managed organically is between 10 and 20%, usually closer to 10, sometimes a little bit lower than that. In the low intervention scenario, where plant-based alternative protein products make up a small percent of the market share, we can see that that increases the amount of land up closer to the 20% range in some cases. Italy is over that, Sweden's over that, but it does provide opportunity and land for more organic farming. And in the high innovation scenario, in most cases, we see that that would enable countries to have more organically managed farmland than the 25% goal that the EU has set for its countries. So again, I think this is one report, but it raises an interesting question. And I think exploring these opportunities and the potential for alternative proteins and organic farming to complement each other is really exciting. And just to share one more figure, from this report to show that this is not due to the need to import more food. So this change in the way farming is done does not force more food production overseas for these countries. So if there's no diet change, again, we're looking at these 10 European countries. This is the expected land use in 2050 as a percent of present day use for farming. So again, we can see we're going to need more land overseas, and still a fairly small percent of domestic farmland that is managed agroecologically. In the low intervention scenario, where plant-based foods continue this moderate rise, we can see this actually reduces the reliance on overseas land for these European countries while enabling them to increase the amount of land that is farmed with agroecological methods. And in the high innovation scenario, we actually see that these countries have the potential to rely on food production within their country more than that from other countries. So again, one case study that I think raises an interesting question about the potential complementarity of these ways of producing food. And now to flip that question, from looking at how alternative proteins may be able to support organic agriculture to looking at how can organic agriculture support the development of alternative proteins, I wanted to just share a little bit more about how we make plant-based meat, and highlight the fact that it is not easy to persuade plant proteins to behave like animal proteins. So again, the process of making plant-based meat starts with raw material selection. So there are various crops and plants that are used to make these products. Again, usually it is the seed proteins that are used. The crop needs to be milled and fractionated and processed into the purified ingredients, which are then often dried into a powder form so that they are more stable, and can be treated in different ways to get the proteins in the final formulation and manufacturing stage to move from this very globular native plant protein structure into this more fibrous structure that mimics the animal proteins that we typically find in meat. So there are several steps here. And what we see is that the way the crop is grown, the place that it's grown, the weather conditions where it's grown, the way that it's processed into ingredient, all of these things impact the way that protein is going to behave in the final product. So because of this, I think it's interesting to ask the question, what unique characteristics might organic plant proteins possess? Is it possible that they would have an improved amino acid profile? Could they be easier to texturize? Could the organic methods that are used for the growth of the crop and then the way that it is processed into ingredients lead to better taste or flavor, or to protein that is more digestible? And so I think there's a lot of interesting research questions that can be asked to look at these things. And I am cheating a little bit because we know that there's some evidence to suggest that, yes, this is the case. And so as the case study for this, I am highlighting Dr. Dill here and some of the research that she did as a GFI grantee, starting back in 2019, to look at how organic crop production and organic processing of those crops into protein and carbohydrate ingredients for food applications can lead to some novel characteristics of these ingredients. And again, you can talk to Dill for more information about this. But what she found was that there are unique nutritional and functional characteristics for these organic ingredients. And I think it's really exciting to think about how those can be used in alternative protein products and plant-based foods. So hopefully this has made you think a little bit about whether there are ways that you might want to get involved in research opportunities at the intersection of plant-based foods and organic agriculture. And so if so, I wanted to just highlight a few that we see as being potentially valuable. I'm sure this is not an exhaustive list, but just some of the ways that I think we can really, again, advance both of these areas simultaneously. So as I just mentioned on the previous slide, I think there are some exciting questions to be asked related to how organic breeding impacts protein quality and functionality, what the opportunities are for reducing off flavors and improving flavor profiles. And hey, is it possible that organically grown crops don't even have some of the same off flavor issues that conventional crops do? I don't know, but interesting question. I think, again, just the genetic resources for organic crops, thinking about how we can begin to take all of this data when you're looking at all of the different characteristics from genotypes, phenotypes, growing conditions, growing seasons, soil quality, and then looking at protein quantity and quality. There is a lot of data out there. How can we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to help us better understand and predict crop protein structure and function, and what types of data methods are out there to make us able to innovate more quickly? On the ingredient side, how can we investigate organic product quality and consistency? Again, not just protein, but also the lipids, the starches, the other parts of the crops. What unique opportunities might there be, using organic crops and methods to create these ingredients that provide better value and functionality for the food product manufacturers? What are the sensory and functional attributes? I think there's some exciting work going on to look at the upcycling of side streams in general for alternative protein products. And again, those side streams might have unique, exciting, functional characteristics when they're coming from organic crops. So what opportunities are there for that? And then also thinking about, can these side streams or ingredients be used as feedstocks for either microbial fermentation or even animal cell culture for cultivated meat? So are there new market opportunities there for some of these side streams and ingredients? And then finally, but very importantly, looking at the nutrition and human health impacts of organically produced crops and ingredients for alternative proteins. And coupling that with techno-economic analyses. So again, we're understanding what the economics of this are. Are there ways that organic agriculture can help reduce the cost of alternative proteins? And what are the life cycle and land use implications of doing that? So my last slide, I wanted to just provide a few additional resources and funding opportunities if you're interested in digging into any of these things more. Again, I will share these slides with Dill to pass out to anyone who is interested. So you have all of these links. We recently released our State of the Industry reports, which go into a lot more depth about the commercial research, policy, and regulation of plant-based, cultivated, and fermentation foods, if you're interested in that. And we also have an analysis that we released that's looking at cultivating alternative proteins from commodity crop side streams. Again, while this is focused on conventionally produced commodity crops, I think a lot of the questions that are asked and the learnings from this report could be translated to specialty crops, pulse crops, organic crops. So there might be some interesting things to look at there as well. 2 funding opportunities that are not specific to organic agriculture, but I think could have relevance for some of the research for people in this audience. I've also linked here GFI's 2024 research grant program. Unfortunately, the deadline is very soon, so you don't have a lot of time. But one of the priority topic areas is focused on upcycling side streams. So if that's of interest, take a look. And then also the Bezos Earth Fund recently released this $100 million funding opportunity for AI solutions to tackle climate change and nature loss. And one of the key focus areas for this challenge is on sustainable protein. So again, if someone is working at the intersection of plant proteins and AI, this could be another interesting opportunity for you to explore. And with that, I will just say thank you again for your attention. I really do welcome comments and questions. Again, I wanted to present this as a hypothesis, which means it's something that we need to test and refine and think about. But yeah, I just want to thank you for your attention. Say that, we exist to support researchers and companies and people working in the alternative protein field. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me or any of my colleagues if you are interested in exploring more about this area.
Thank you so much, Erin. It was wonderful presentation. Oh my God, there's a lot of information, and thank you for bringing this into the audience. There are a lot of questions, and I will start with the first question because I am a very big advocate for the plant-based protein, and I eat a lot of plant-based protein. I saw in your presentation, like it says it's too processed. So before even like the Good Food Institute start talking about this, like some products are actually out in the market, but when I look at it, there's like 20 to 30 ingredients. So that's the one thing, even though I'm a plant-based eater, I don't like that. So what is your perception on that category and how do you address that to the consumer? And is there any plan for the Good Food Institute to change that perception?
Yeah, so this is something that our corporate engagement team thinks about and works on a lot because they're, talking to consumers, they're talking to companies and trying to understand. And there really is a desire for clean labels and for less processed food. One point I will make just to start with is that I think it's really important for us to recognize that not all processing is bad. And I think there is the consumer perception that if it's processed, it's bad. And I think we need to, it's more nuanced than that. That's not necessarily the case. But yes, I think, we've seen, so Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods are kind of the 2 leading plant-based meat companies. And we've seen them go through 3 or maybe even 4 iterations of their products now. And in each of those, they're trying to take out ingredients. They're trying to reduce the saturated fat. So I absolutely think that there's a recognition from the industry that reducing processing as much as possible is good. I think there's also a need to educate consumers that, not all processing is bad. And ultimately, for a lot of the consumers who do want to eat these foods, we can't sacrifice the sensory aspects. And so there's still a lot of need for research and innovation that will help us figure out how we get the taste and texture with clean ingredients with less processing.
That's I was in the same thinking pattern. Like, yeah, because we need a lot of R&D to reduce the ingredients back and then the flavor. So yeah, and then I'm really happy that you guys are looking into the ingredients and the like the pulses or anything like the what is the basic material. So what that can contribute. That's a great idea. So there's questions. So I'm going to go to the audience. And one of the question is asking about um, we want to increase the plant-based protein consumption. Of course, we want people to eat more plant-based food. Importing those to the those places does not have can help. It's kind of a long question. I think the question is because the some products are importing from different parts of the world to the US. And how do you actually do the quality control of those um, and increase the consumption in local markets?
Yeah, this is a challenging question, and I think, is not something that is just applicable to the plant-based foods industry, but we do have a global food system. And I think, on the regulatory side, the quality control side, it's definitely something that needs to be figured out. Um, I don't feel like I have the answers, but I am glad there are people thinking about this question. And I think that this is, I am fortunate in the work that I do that I get to talk to a lot of people at US federal funding agencies. And food security is something that we hear from a lot of people. Particularly, I think the pandemic showed us how supply chains are vulnerable, and so thinking about how we can make these more resilient, and a lot of that is trying to bring things to more domestic production because then it is easier to have regulations, have quality control, know that when we say something is organic, if it's in the U.S., it is, you know, the US standard and definition for organic is being applied. And so, I mean, I think one way, and maybe this is a bit of a cop out because it's the easy answer, is to think about, how can we shorten and make more food supply chains domestic. So again, that's why I'm really excited to think about how can we be producing more pulses, more crops that can be used for plant-based protein here in the US versus having to import from abroad.
I
Um,
Yeah, that is something like with the USDA certificate as well, like the organic certificate, because some of the products, like you're saying, they're coming from different countries, and then how is it the same as local production? So I totally agree with you on that. Okay, so the next question you have, we still have a couple of minutes. Do you think the US plant-based protein hurt by releasing those products early without much R&D and importing low quality proteins?
yeah, again, I mean, I think there's always this tension, right? You want to get things out there, and particularly if you try and go into the company mindset. Again, this is why I advocate very strongly for a lot of academic research, for public sector support, because I think that the timelines are longer than what a lot of companies face. They're having to produce products quickly, show returns for their investors. And I think sometimes, yeah, that does lead to products getting out there maybe before we would ideally like to see that from an industry ecosystem perspective. Um, and we have to look at the data that people say, I've bought this once and I'm not buying it again. So I don't know that I would say it hurts the market because I think you got to be getting products out there. You got to be hearing what consumers say, what they like about them, what they don't like about them. But I am excited because I think we're at a point in the industry where people realize there is a very high standard for these products, and the ones that will start to be released now will hopefully be meeting consumers on those taste and texture issues, and getting people to say, "Wow, I actually like this. It fits in the recipes I want to make or whatever," and we'll see those repeat purchases.
Yeah, I think this is where the Good Food Institute play a really big role, and I thank you for that because early products are not really good. So that's like now you guys have these grant opportunities. We researchers do many things, and then you already linked to the DC, and so we can change some policies. And that is something you guys have been doing for last 5 years that I have seen things change. So thank you for that. I think we are into a right track on developing these great products.
I agree.
Yeah. So this is the question from Elise. And thank you for interesting talk. Of course, it is wonderful talk. The US market for animal-based protein is heavily subsidized. Does GFI have a path to achieve competing prices for plant-based proteins relative to these heavy subsidized meat? That's it.
Yeah. So again, I mean, I think this is something that our policy team really works on, and we really want to try and create a level playing field from a policy and regulation standpoint for alternative protein products. So one argument would be, well, let's subsidize the growing of crops and the production of ingredients and things for alternative proteins. Let's give them the same opportunities. Even we're seeing now from like a loan perspective for companies to be able to get a loan to scale up a facility. Alternative protein companies haven't been eligible for those. So how can we do that? So I think there's a lot of work that can be done on the policy side to create equal opportunities for alternative proteins. And then, fundamentally, from an efficiency standpoint, I think by innovating, by scaling up, we're going to be able to see the prices come down even, without subsidies and things like that. So it's going to take a combination of strategies. And I think it's something that we're definitely looking very closely at, trying to, on our science and technology team, trying to understand what are the key places in the production of alternative proteins where we're seeing, most of the cost driver coming from, and are there ways that we can modify that to bring the cost down?
Yeah, that was my last question to you too. That so plant-based milk is the most expensive thing compared to the regular milk in the market. And this milk has some allergens too, like in almond milk, and some people can't have it. So that's where the uh like soy, some people can't have soy milk. So that's the like the pulses are playing a bigger role on that. But have you guys thinking of like how to reduce the cost of compared to the animal milk? I mean, it,
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I'm excited about is the way that alternative proteins are being incorporated into talks about the bioeconomy and circular economy. And I think when we are starting with a crop and we're breaking it down into ingredients, we really need to think about how are we using the entire crop? We don't want to be using just the protein and throwing everything else away. So what value can come from all parts of that? And is there a place for bioactive compounds or nutraceuticals that could, also be isolated from the plant into totally separate non-food markets that bring in additional economic value. So what are the ways that we can create, a whole economy around this where all proteins are one part of it, but these additional streams may also be a way that we can, kind of make all of these pieces fit and work together, and still be really efficient and utilizing all of the materials and molecules and things that we have available to us.
this is wonderful, and this is a really nice that we end our this year's webinar series with this high note. Because our first talk from Dr. Masori from Cornell, he was talking about how do we can bring pulses kind of crops into this protein market. And now you are showing us what is the opportunities as breeders we have. And everybody who joined here, and you will have this webinar from the YouTube, and we have a subscription so people can, whoever registered, there's a lot of people around the world. So thank you so much, Erin, to open up our eyes and get more help on the plant-based organic. And you guys need to go get doing the things that you do in the Good Food Institute. Just do it. So it's awesome, and thank you so much. And I hope to see you guys soon in DC. And
All right.
yes,
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
bye.